Saleh. And on the show today, Vladimir Putin has called for a temporary administration to take over the governance in Kiev for a potential path to peace. And Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has said that the era of deep economic, security and military ties between Canada and the United States is now over. But let's of course start with this big story. Where is Russia's president seeking a change of guard in Ukrainian leadership? Does Vladimir Putin want Volodymyr Zelensky out? Because that does appear to be the case. Now, according to the latest remarks that have been made by the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin has called for a temporary administration to take charge of the governance in Ukraine, which he says will pave the way for elections in the war-torn nation.
In principle, of course, it would be possible under the auspices of the UN, with the United States, even with European countries, and of course with our partners and friends, to discuss the possibility of introducing temporary administration in Ukraine. For what? In order to hold democratic elections, in order to bring to power a viable government that enjoys the people's trust, and then begin negotiations with it on a peace treaty, sign legitimate documents that will be recognized throughout the world and will be reliable and stable.
Now, Vladimir Putin made these remarks during a visit to Russia's northern port of Murmansk. The leader also spoke on the US negotiating with both Russia and Ukraine for a ceasefire. Now, Putin said that he believes his American counterpart is sincerely invested in ending the conflict. But Vladimir Putin's remarks on Zelensky have triggered an outpouring of strong reactions from people in Ukraine. Now, many have said that Ukraine's political landscape is not the Russian president's business. Listen in.
I think he has no right to say so. In Ukraine, Ukrainians must take all the decisions. It is up to Ukrainian people. It is up to us. How is he even relevant here? He can make decisions in his own country. He has no power over our land and us.
It is our country, and we must decide ourselves what to do, and no one should impose terms on us. Since he is an aggressor and he launched the war against Ukraine, we are the ones to lay out the conditions for the end of the war, and he must listen to those conditions.
Every new statement he makes is getting more and more ridiculous. I do not think any of the world leaders will agree to that. And I do not think Ukrainian authorities and Ukrainian people will agree to that.
Now, Ukraine's constitution does not allow for elections during the time of war. However, Volodymyr Zelensky has said on several occasions that he is willing to step down on the condition that Ukraine becomes a NATO member. All right, now to give us more perspective in this, we are joined in this broadcast by Professor Peter Kuznick, who's a professor of history and director of Nuclear Studies Institute at the American University, and he's joining us live on this broadcast. Professor Kuznick, this is an interesting sort of a comment that has been made by Vladimir Putin, where he says that there must be a temporary different administration other than that of Zelensky that should take over in Kiev, which could pave the path for peace. In your assessment, he's asking for a change of the Ukrainian leadership for peace to come about.
Vladimir Putin has been making this demand for months now. He's been saying that Zelensky is not a legitimate leader. But the more that Trump and Putin criticize Zelensky and question his legitimacy, the more Zelensky's popularity rises inside Ukraine. When Trump first confronted him in that nasty confrontation in the Oval Office, Zelensky's approval rating was in the low 50s. Mm-hmm. According to the latest polling, it's now up to 69%. We've seen this elsewhere. The more that Trump criticizes Canada, talks about Canada, raises the tariffs, and says Canada should be in the 51st state, he's saved the Liberal Party.
Right.
You know, so these things have their opposite reaction from what Putin or Trump might want.
Interesting that you mentioned that both Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, of course, is called Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator. There are members of the Trump administration who've met with members of the opposition in Ukraine. But is Volodymyr Zelensky the man who is being a bit of a roadblock towards peace, or are there some serious strategic differences between Russia and the United States of America and the NATO military alliance which have become a problem for peace? Or is it Volodymyr Zelensky?
It's not Zelensky by himself, certainly. He's being egged on by the British, the French, and other Europeans. Trump really is less friendly to Zelensky, certainly than Biden was, but also than the European leaders are right now. So we've got real issues that they've got to sit down and negotiate. They can't even come to an agreement about a temporary ceasefire in the Black Sea. Mm-hmm. So the demands that the situation is that Russia has domination in the battlefield. Russia is on the offensive when it comes militarily right now, which puts Zelensky in Ukraine in a very difficult bargaining position. And the fact that Trump has such residual and deep-seated hostility toward Ukraine and an openness toward Russia bolsters Putin's hand in these deliberations. But Ukraine is a democracy. Ukraine is governed by a constitution. It has its own laws, and among them is that elections will not be held while they're at war. So Putin can say all he wants, and clearly he'd like to see somebody other than Zelensky in there.
Right.
But the Ukrainian people are going to make that decision, not Trump and not Putin. But Trump is this new mineral deal. The latest draft of this new mineral deal is so openly one-sided, so flagrantly neo-colonial, that probably the Ukrainians can't even accept it. But they are in a weak position. As Trump said, you have no cards to play. But the other warning that's really important, when Trump said you're gambling with World War III, mm-hmm. There's truth to that statement, which is why all of us should do everything we can to push for a real negotiated settlement as quickly as possible.
Interesting. We'll have to, of course, see as to how quickly a negotiated settlement can, of course, be reached. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Kuznick, for joining us with our perspective there.
My pleasure.
So it is election season in Canada, and the biggest issue for the elections in Canada happens to be Donald Trump. The latest tariffs announced by the American president has invited some sharp reactions across the political spectrum. While each may have a different opinion on the deal with Trump, the consensus seems to be to put Canada first and to retaliate if tariffs are imposed. In a grim assessment of the Canada-US ties, Prime Minister Mark Carney has said that the era of deep economic security and military ties between Canada and the United States is effectively over. Now, Mike Carney has also said that President Trump's office has reached out to arrange for a call, and they'll be speaking certainly in the course of the next day or two.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations.
Now, Mark Carney said that nothing is off the table regarding the possible countermeasures, but said that he will wait until next week to respond to the latest tariffs. Now, Mark Carney also said that he'll speak to the provincial premiers and business leaders on Friday to discuss a coordinated response.
It's my solemn promise that when President Trump threatens us again, we will fight back. We will fight back with everything we have to get the best deal for Canada. We will build an independent future for our country, stronger than ever.
Now, Ontario's Premier Doug Ford has said that he will retaliate if the US auto tariffs commence on the 2nd of April. Now, Ford, who's been vocal in his criticism of Trump and his tariffs, told reporters that he spoke with the Canadian Prime Minister. Now, Ford also said that he had spoken to the US Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick about the developing situation between the two nations' auto trade.
He's reassuring us that there'll be no plant closures. My response was Ronald Reagan's response, trust but verify. We'll see what happens over the next little while, but this is all about building this relationship. It was a very productive conversation last night, but in saying all that, we need to retaliate. I just got off the phone with the Prime Minister. I had a good conversation with the Prime Minister. He agrees 100%. We need to retaliate when it'll be both the Prime Minister and myself agree. Let's not do this till April 2nd. Let's see what's coming
Now, Canada's opposition Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, has also condemned the unjustified and unprovoked tariffs. He slammed Donald Trump for his auto tariffs announcement, stating that the tariffs will damage both American and Canadian auto workers.
The message to President Trump should be to knock it off. We had the best trade relationship in the world, in the history of the world, before these unnecessary interruptions struck our economy. And they are hurting both sides of the border. They will kill American jobs, and they will erase American prices, and then we will necessarily have to retaliate.
Now, Canada will be heading to the polls on the 28th of April. The Canada-US ties and also a push for strong leadership to counter US President Donald Trump's tariff is expected to dominate the 5-week election race. A US judge has asked Donald Trump's administration to preserve messages from a Signal chat group, where the top national security officials discussed plans of an attack on Yemen's Houthi rebels. The ruling has added to the pressure on the White House after the Atlantic magazine revealed that its editor had been accidentally added to the chat group and was privy to all the plans that were being made. The District Judge James Bosberg has ordered for the government to preserve all Signal communications between the 11th of March till the 15th of March. Now, these dates cover the period between when the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz had set up the chat and had mistakenly, he claims, added the journalist Jeffrey Goldberg and the day of the airstrikes on the Houthi targets. He also ordered the government to file the details by Monday, showing the steps taken to preserve the messages. Now, Jeffrey Goldberg has written that Waltz had set some of the Signal messages to disappear after 1 week and others after 4. And this had raised questions about the officials may have violated the federal records law. The magazine published the full chat on Wednesday, including messages in which Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had revealed the timings of these American attacks on Yemen just hours before they happened, and also the details of the planes that were being used and the missiles that were being fired. Now, Trump has largely pinned the blame on Mike Waltz, saying that he had admitted that he was responsible while denying that any classified material was shared in the group, but it also dismissed calls by the Democrats for the top officials to resign. Judge Bosberg, who made the ruling, has already incurred Trump's wrath after ruling against the administration in a separate migration case. Now, Trump had also launched a fresh attack on Bosberg, saying that it was disgraceful that he was dealing with the Signal case and was calling the judge highly conflicted. The president earlier this month had called for Bosberg to be impeached. But the pressure continues to mount on the White House over the scandal. The top Republican and the Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee have issued a bipartisan call for a Pentagon watchdog to probe the claims made by the Atlantic. A letter from the Republican committee chair, Roger Wicker, and ranking Democrat Jack Reed said that if true, then this reporting raises a number of questions as to the use of unclassified networks to discuss sensitive and classified information. Now, the Democrats have claimed that the lives of U.S. service members could have been put at risk because of this breach, and the RAV has raised some serious questions about the potential intelligence risks.
I think that it's by the awesome grace of God that we are not mourning dead pilots right now. Everyone here knows that the Russians or the Chinese could have gotten all of that information, and they could have passed it on to the Houthis, who easily could have repositioned weapons and altered their plans to knock down planes or sink ships.
Now, several media reports say that active and former U.S. military pilots are unhappy over the leak and fear that this could have put their lives at risk. The House Democrat leader, Hakeem Jeffries, has called for President Trump to fire the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, over the leak.
Of a fight right now as it relates to Pete Hegseth. He needs to resign or be fired by Donald Trump. We've made that clear across the caucus. And Democrats, I think, showed fight in the Senate hearing on Tuesday and in the House hearing on Wednesday. Our veterans have stood up to push back against this stunning national security breach. That's a fight that we're in right now.
But despite all the controversy and demands of a probe, the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi said that the breach was unlikely to face a criminal investigation. Now, elections for a vacant judge seat in the Wisconsin Supreme Court is turning out to be a high-stakes battle. And the billionaires, believe it or not, are openly backing their respective candidates in an election that is supposed to be non-partisan. Now, billionaires George Soros and Elon Musk are pouring in millions into the judicial election. Now, voting for selecting one of the judges to the state's Supreme Court will be held on the 1st of April. But the campaigning and the scale of the funds raised indicate as to how important this election is for both the parties. The billionaires have spent a whopping $81 million on just this one election.
Elon Musk entered the scene, a lot of people across the country started contributing because I think that they just were extremely disturbed to see Elon Musk wading into a state judicial race and trying to buy a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and just thought, you know, enough's enough of this. So I think that that has been, you know, kind of helpful in helping us to counter some of that funding, you know, the millions and millions that Elon Musk is spending, because, you know, there are good people all over the country that care about these things.
I don't control who decides to support my campaign. Now, what's not being asked is no one's demanding of my opponent to explain where did the $19 million her campaign has spent on television ads. Where did that money come from? Because she's got well over double the money that she's brought in from apparently huge transfers into her campaign. I don't have that kind of money.
Now, Wisconsin is a swing state. U.S. President Donald Trump won the state during the November presidential polls. But this election is a litmus test for the Trump administration, with lawsuits stacking up one after another against Trump and his cabinet. And it will determine if the state of Wisconsin has a Democrat or a Republican-leaning bench.
It's waste and abuse because they make...
The Bangladesh police has leveled some fresh allegations against the deposed Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. The Awami League leader is now being accused of trying to overthrow the caretaker government. Now, earlier in the day, Bangladesh's police officials said that they have filed a new criminal case against the ousted leader. The development comes after reports revealed a virtual Awami League meeting, and according to the case documents, 577 Awami League members attended a virtual meet last December. The complaint further says, and I quote, the document that many party members, both inside and outside of the country, had pledged to continue with their fight until their last breath. So far, the complaint names Sheikh Hasina and 72 other people. However, the authorities have also said that more people could be named in the case as the investigation is still ongoing. Now, Bangladesh witnessed a change of guard last August after Sheikh Hasina fled the country when protests broke out over job quotas. Ever since, an interim government has been running the nation. The Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus is currently the chief advisor of the caretaker government until fresh elections are held. And polls are expected to be held by June 2026, contingent to the implementation of sweeping reforms. The Sudanese Army has said that it has taken full control of the capital city of Khartoum. And this comes after a week-long fight to capture the presidential palace, the airport and other key sites from the rival paramilitary RSF group. The Sudanese Army spokesperson Nabil Abdullah said that the army managed to successfully and forcibly cleansed the last pockets of the Dagalo militia in Khartoum. After recapturing the presidential palace, the Sudanese Army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan declared that Khartoum is free and it is done. The war between the Sudanese military and the RSF has been raging since 2023. The latest takeover comes a day after the army was accused of one of the war's deadliest airstrikes, in which dozens of people were killed in a market in the western region of Darfur. Now, earlier in the week, the RSF had officially announced a military alliance with the rebel group, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, led by Abdelaziz al-Hilu, that controls the key border areas with South Sudan and Ethiopia. Since 2023, the fighting in Sudan has killed thousands of people, has also uprooted about 12 million people, creating the world's largest hunger and displacement crises, dividing the country into two parts, with the army holding the east and the north, and the RSF controlling nearly all of Darfur in the west and parts of the south. At one point, the army and the RSF had been in a fragile partnership, jointly staging a coup in 2021 and also fighting on the same side for years in the western state of Darfur. With tensions flaring in Nepal's capital Kathmandu, as the police have used tear gas and water cannons to disperse the pro-monarchist protesters who tried to break through security barricades. Several people have been injured in the clashes. The city, in fact, saw some heavy police presence as rival pro-monarchists and Republicans held simultaneous demonstrations, while the pro-monarchists gathered at the Thinkune district in the capital city, chanting slogans calling for the return of Nepal's former king. The Republican supporters assembled in the Bhrikumiti Mandap neighborhood, defending the current system and demanding for action against corruption.
Pro-monarchy protesters have yet again gathered in Kathmandu, demanding the restoration of monarchy. This is a sentiment that has been fueled by the constant political instability, corruption, and economic stagnation. I'm here in the Kathmandu, where just a clash broke out between the two groups, between the cops and the protesters. Police had to fire tear gases and water cannons after the protesters barged into the restricted area, tearing down the barricades, and several individuals have been arrested. As you can see, many of the stones were pelted on the police, and the tear gases continues on the protesters.
Now, the monarchists, including members of the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party, have intensified their calls for the restoration of the monarchy after a recent video message from the former king Gyanendra Shah. Meanwhile, the Republican leaders, including the Maoist chief Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda, addressed the supporters, reaffirming their commitment to Nepal's republican system. Now, several demonstrators were in fact detained as they attempted to move towards a restricted area. With political divisions deepening, Nepal continues to witness some intense debates over its future governance. And with that's the wrap on this edition of Race to Power. Thanks for watching.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
Technology redefines our future. Empower yourself with cutting-edge innovation. Discover, secure, dominate. Turn your assets into powerful tools. Enter the era of tokenization. Token Money Magnet by Kalp Decentra Foundation, the first of its kind. Learn, master, transform with every episode. Led by pioneers of the industry. Grab this moment to unlock the tokenization revolution.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
This week on Tech It Out, we take an in-depth look into what Signal is. We show you a robot that is helping build cars. And we show you how UK is experimenting with driverless cars. This and more on WION World is One at these times.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Technology redefines our future. Empower yourself with cutting-edge innovation. Discover, secure, dominate. Turn your assets into powerful tools. Enter the era of tokenization. Token Money Magnet by Kalp Decentra Foundation, the first of its kind. Learn, master, transform with every episode. Led by pioneers of the industry. Grab this moment to unlock the tokenization revolution.
Hello and welcome. You're watching WION World is One. My name is Mohammed Saleh, and let's start this broadcast by taking a quick look at what is making headlines at this hour. At least 147 are now reported to be killed and hundreds of others injured in Myanmar and Thailand after the 7.7 magnitude earthquake rattles Southeast Asia. The toll is expected to rise pretty sharply. An emergency has been declared in both countries, and Myanmar's junta has also called for some urgent support for rescue and relief work. And India's External Affairs Ministry has said that it is in touch with Bangkok on whether or not the BIMSTEC summit due for early next month will take place. Now, India is also in touch with the authorities in Myanmar as it assures support post the earthquake. The American President Donald Trump and Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney are to speak today, according to the White House, amid soaring tensions over tariffs and Trump's call to make Canada the 51st state. The Carney had said that the US-Canada relations can no longer be what they were. At least about 3 people have been killed and scores of others have been grievously injured in the Israeli bombings on South Lebanon. This is the first time that Israel has carried out an airstrike in Lebanon after November, when the ceasefire came into effect. Israel's defense minister has threatened continued bombings if Lebanon does not ensure peace. The Nepalese police fires tear gas and water cannons to disperse thousands of people who had gathered in Kathmandu demanding for the restoration of the monarchy. The protests have come amidst a rising anger against the political leaders accused of misusing democratic freedoms.